The Empire had ruled the stars for longer than anyone could remember. Whole worlds bowed before them, their banners shining in the light of 1,000 suns. Every planet that resisted had been turned to dust. Every voice that rose against them was silenced. Fear was their weapon, and it had worked for centuries. In every corner of the galaxy, the Zorathian Empire was a name spoken with a mix of respect and dread. They called themselves bringers of order. But the truth was much simpler. They ruled because no one dared to stand against them. But one morning, deep within the cold silence of the Orion expanse, an alert broke through the Empire's peace. It wasn't a battle cry or a distress signal. It was something else, something quiet. A single blip appeared on the deep space monitors. The technicians in the Imperial Command Center leaned forward, confused. The signal was faint, barely there, but steady. It didn't match any known pattern. No trade ship, no military craft, no beacon from an allied world. It came from nowhere, out beyond the mapped routes, drifting slowly toward Imperial territory. At first they thought it might be a chunk of space debris or a lost probe from one of the older empires. But as the readings came through, the confusion turned into unease. The object wasn't tumbling. It was moving, slowly, deliberately. One of the senior officers called in a scan. The results arrived a few minutes later, and every conversation in the control room stopped. It was a ship. Old, small, human-made. The officer frowned. "That's impossible," he muttered. Humans didn't travel that far. Their colonies were still young, their ships primitive. The Empire had records of Earth, of humanity's fragile beginnings, but this was beyond anything the archives described. The ship was silent. No signal, no transponder code, not even a power reading. Just a dark, drifting vessel with the faint outline of a hull that looked centuries old. Still, orders were orders. A fleet was dispatched to investigate. 3 destroyers jumped into the region, their metallic frames cutting through the empty dark. The ship hung there, motionless, quiet, and perfectly centered, as if waiting. They hailed it once, twice, then 10 times. No answer. The Imperial captain, a calm but seasoned officer, gave the order to bring the ship aboard for inspection. As the docking clamps extended, the hull scanners flickered again. The ship's surface was made of an unknown alloy, older than anything in the Empire's database. Yet it showed no damage, no decay. When the boarding team stepped inside, they expected wreckage, broken panels, floating debris, maybe even human remains. But what they found was something else entirely. The corridors were clean. The lights were off, but the structure was intact. The air was breathable. Every room they entered was in perfect condition, as though someone had cleaned it moments ago. But there were no signs of life. No bodies, no movement, just silence. Their footsteps echoed against the walls. The deeper they went, the stranger it felt. The ship was small, yes, but every inch of it seemed designed with purpose. The control panels were ancient, yet they glowed faintly when touched. One of the soldiers spoke quietly through his comm. "There's no decay. This thing could have been here for hundreds of years." The team's leader didn't respond. He had noticed something strange. Every panel they touched seemed to react, almost like the ship was aware of their presence. Finally, they reached the central chamber. The door slid open without a sound. Inside stood a tall cylindrical structure pulsing with faint blue light. It wasn't mechanical, not entirely. It felt alive, humming softly as though breathing. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances. "Record everything," the team leader ordered. "We'll let the scientists deal with this." As they moved closer, the air changed. The static in their comms grew louder. Then suddenly the lights across the ship flickered on. A deep hum filled the halls, low and resonant. Every member of the team froze. The light from the core brightened until it was almost blinding. Then a voice, soft, clear, and utterly human, spoke. It didn't come through the speakers. It came through their implants, their thoughts, we remember. The voice echoed once, then silence returned. The ship powered down again, leaving the team standing in cold, artificial daylight. They rushed back to their transport and sent the report. The Empire's Science Council was immediately notified. A recovery ship was ordered to tow the vessel to the nearest research station. For days, scientists studied the ship. Every system they touched led to another mystery. The material wasn't listed in any known database. Its power source seemed to be self-generating, drawing energy from the vacuum itself. No one could explain it. The only clue was that short transmission, the phrase that had reached their minds. We remember. What did it mean? Who remembered? The Empire had seen countless relics from dead civilizations before. But this one was different. This one was human. And that alone made the High Command uneasy. Humans to the Empire were primitive, a species just beginning to crawl out of their home system, too fragile to pose any real threat. Their wars were local, their ships outdated. The Empire hadn't even bothered to conquer them. They simply ignored them. And yet here was proof that humans had somehow sent a ship farther than any Imperial surveyor had dared to go. A ship older than the Empire's own recorded history, still running, still aware. Some officers began to whisper that it might be a trick. Others believed it was a weapon, a spy device meant to infiltrate their systems. But curiosity outweighed fear. The scientists connected their network to the ship's core, hoping to extract data. The moment the connection was made, alarms rang across the entire station. Monitors flashed with code, lines and symbols none could read. Then suddenly every display turned white. Images began to appear, projected onto every screen, every surface, even the visor glass of the personnel inside. The images were old. Human ships burning in space, worlds under siege, battles lost before they began, 1,000 cries for help unanswered. The Empire recognized the insignias on the attacking vessels, Zorathian ships. Their ships. They watched in silence as the truth unfolded. Centuries ago, before the Empire had united under one banner, an early Zorathian warlord had led a campaign across unknown sectors. During one of those raids, they had stumbled upon human explorers, fragile, unarmed, and filled with hope. The warlord destroyed them all. The event was erased from history, their deaths forgotten. But the ship remembered. Every second of that massacre was stored within its core. Every scream, every transmission, every desperate attempt to survive, it was all there. Preserved by an AI designed to endure forever, the scientists stood frozen, faces pale. The Empire's command demanded explanations, but there were none. The ship had done what no weapon ever had. It forced them to remember. The technicians tried to cut the connection, but the systems refused. The ship was now in control. Doors sealed, alarms blared, power grids failed one by one. It was as though the vessel was alive again, awake after centuries of silence. And then as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The ship's lights dimmed, the images vanished, and the silence returned. But something had changed. The Empire's command network was gone. Entire sectors went dark. Navigation systems failed, and communications across the fleet were scrambled. The Empire, for the first time in history, felt small. No weapon had been fired. No battle had been fought. Yet their entire order trembled in fear of a single silent human vessel. Far away, in the cold depths of space, the ship began to move again. Slowly, gracefully, it turned away from the Empire's station and drifted toward the stars. No one dared to follow. And as the ship disappeared into the darkness, the Empire's leaders gathered in silence. Each one haunted by the same thought. If this was only a single vessel, what else had humanity built? For centuries, the Empire had ruled through fear. Now, for the first time, they understood it. The research station was gone now, silent and cold, drifting in space like a forgotten tomb. The Empire's command had tried to erase what happened there. They shut down transmissions, deleted files, and ordered everyone involved to remain quiet. But the story spread anyway. It always does. Whisper by whisper, it reached the highest council and the lowest soldiers alike. A single silent human ship had entered their space, and nothing had been the same since. At first, the Empire's leaders dismissed it as an isolated incident. They told their people it was only a malfunction, a ghost signal, a glitch in the system. But deep inside, they were not so sure. The ship had shown them things that should not have existed. Images of their ancestors destroying the first human explorers, their screams echoing across forgotten time. Those images stayed in their minds, haunting their thoughts even as they tried to carry on. Fleet Command decided to send a team again, this time with stronger defenses and more control. The ship had drifted farther away, but it wasn't lost. It seemed to move with purpose, traveling through systems as if it knew exactly where it was going. Every time they tried to track it, it vanished from their scanners, then appeared somewhere else, always silent, always watching. They finally found it near the edge of the nebula that marked the border of Imperial space. The ship floated there calm, its surface glowing faintly like it was breathing. The Empire's newest dreadnought approached with caution. No one wanted to board this time. They decided instead to study it from afar. Dozens of scanning beams touched the hull, but the readings came back strange. The ship's structure was constantly changing, rebuilding itself almost as if it didn't like being watched. The crew inside the dreadnought began to feel uneasy. The lights flickered even though the power was stable. The air felt heavier. Every few minutes, someone thought they heard faint whispers, like voices trapped inside the metal walls. Then something unexpected happened. The ship moved just slightly, but enough to trigger the dreadnought's defense systems. The alarms rang out. Weapons locked automatically. Before the commander could give the order to disengage, a flash of light filled the entire viewing deck. When it cleared, the human vessel was gone. The dreadnought's crew scrambled to regain control. All systems were intact, but the scanners showed something impossible. The ship hadn't jumped away. It had simply vanished from physical space. No trace of radiation, no engine trail, no signature. It was like it had never been there. Across the Empire, confusion turned into fear. The incident log showed the readings had continued even after the vessel disappeared. The sensors still registered something enormous but invisible. That night, across dozens of stations, officers reported seeing strange flickers on their monitors. A shape, dark and ghost-like, passing behind their ships in silence. Some thought it was a glitch. Others swore it was the same human vessel, larger now, almost alive. The Empire decided to contain the panic. But one scientist, a quiet observer from the original research team, couldn't stay silent any longer. She had seen the recordings before they were deleted. She had seen the words the ship had projected before the systems shut down. Those words were not just "we remember." There was more. Hidden beneath the noise buried in the signal was another phrase repeated over and over. "They are coming." She tried to warn the high command, but no one listened. They were too proud to believe humans could be a danger. They were a small, fragile race. They had no great fleet, no empire, no colonies worth noticing. But the more she studied the patterns, the clearer it became. The ship was not a weapon. It was a message. Days later, without warning, the message grew louder. Across the Empire's communication network, signals began to distort. Every channel, every frequency, every secure link was infected by the same sound, a deep pulse like a heartbeat. And within it, that same human voice whispering softly, "We remember." Panic spread faster than fire. Civilian ships refused to travel. Soldiers reported nightmares. The Empire's most advanced AI systems shut down on their own, as if refusing to process what they were hearing. Then the fleets began to vanish. At first, it was small patrols near the outer systems. They'd report visual contact with a shadow in space, something enormous moving without light, and then their signals would fade. Search parties found only empty wrecks, the ships untouched but drained of all power, not even a trace of battle. The Empire's rulers demanded answers. They sent more ships, more drones, more scans, but the more they searched, the less they understood. The ship didn't fight, didn't attack, didn't even respond. It simply appeared and disappeared as if to remind them that it could. One by one, the officers began to understand something terrible. This wasn't about revenge. It was about remembrance. The ship wasn't just carrying human technology. It was carrying human history. Everything their ancestors had done to humanity, every lie erased from the records, was coming back like a reflection they could no longer hide from. Then, for the first time, a message appeared. Not through scanners or comms, but across the stars themselves. Every starship in the sector received the same visual, the image of a single planet glowing blue in the darkness. Earth. No one in the Empire had seen it before. It looked small, quiet, almost harmless, but under it was a single sentence written in human code, translated instantly by their systems. "Do you fear us now?" The transmission lasted only a few seconds before the networks crashed again. But it was enough. Every commander, every council member, every soldier who saw it knew that humanity was no longer the forgotten race they once mocked. For the first time in their long rule, the Empire looked at a world they had ignored for centuries and felt something they could not explain. dread. The scientist who had studied the signal locked herself in her lab. She finally cracked the encryption on the ship's memory core that had been copied before the blackout. Inside were not just images of the past but projections of the future. Human fleets leaving Earth, built with technology centuries ahead of the Empire's. Silent ships, powered by the same impossible energy that moved the ghost vessel. They were coming not for war but for balance. Humanity had changed. They had evolved beyond fear, beyond power. And now, the Empire realized too late that it wasn't the humans who should have been afraid all along. It was them. That night, somewhere in the depths of space, the silent vessel reappeared. It glowed softly against the stars like a guardian watching from the void. It sent no sound, no message. It only drifted slowly through the darkness, its light flickering like a heartbeat. The Empire's sensors picked it up again, this time closer than before. The readings showed movement within, shadows, figures, maybe even people. But that was impossible. The ship had been empty when they boarded it. The image fed through their monitors one last time before the systems shut down. The vessel tilted slightly as though turning to face the watchers, and then disappeared once more into silence. No explosions. No beams of light. Just stillness. But across the Empire's core worlds, people began to feel something strange. Lights flickered in their homes. Power systems dimmed, and in that darkness, for the briefest moment, every screen, every display, every reflection showed the same thing. An ancient human face staring back, eyes calm and unblinking, whispering softly, "We remember." The Empire didn't sleep that night, and from that moment on, every shadow in space carried meaning. Every silence felt alive. They knew the humans were out there watching, not for revenge, but for justice written across the stars. The silent vessel had not come to fight. It had come to remind the mighty Empire that no power lasts forever, and that even in the endless dark, some memories never fade. The silence after the human vessel's arrival still haunted every corner of the Empire. The rulers called it a trick, a strange illusion created by rebels or distant systems trying to scare them. But deep down, no one truly believed that anymore. Something had changed. The stars didn't feel the same. The people didn't feel the same. And those who had seen the human ship with their own eyes could never forget what they felt. Something that was not fear, but something deeper. In the following days, the Empire sent countless fleets to search the region where the silent vessel had appeared. They scanned every star, every dust field, every drifting signal. Nothing. No trace of any ship, no heat signature, no sound. It was as if the human vessel had been made of light and vanished back into the dark. But the ship hadn't disappeared completely. It left behind something that no one expected, an echo. When the Empire's scientists replayed the communication logs from the first contact, a faint pulse appeared in the background noise. At first, they thought it was interference. But after hours of study, they realized it was a message, a pattern too perfect to be random. They spent nights decoding it. When they finally translated it, the message said only a few words. "We are not gone. We are awake." The Empire's highest council gathered the moment they heard it. The words spread through the ranks like wildfire. What did it mean? Were the humans alive somewhere, waiting, watching? The council ordered silence. No one was allowed to speak of the message. Any recordings were classified and hidden deep in Imperial vaults. But secrets like that never stay buried for long. Someone leaked the truth, and once again the people began to whisper. The legends of old humanity returned to every conversation. People began to ask questions they were forbidden to ask. What if the humans never died? What if they evolved? The Empire had built its strength on the belief that it had erased the last traces of humanity centuries ago. Their fall had been celebrated as the end of an age of chaos. But now that story was starting to collapse. Meanwhile, across the outer colonies, strange things began to happen. Entire communication networks flickered for seconds and then restored themselves, but with tiny changes. Codes were rewritten, signals adjusted. Ships in deep space reported seeing flashes of light that didn't come from any star. Then a single Imperial patrol ship vanished. Its last transmission was only 3 words. "They are here." That message sent waves of panic through the command chain. Fleets were mobilized. Stations were locked down, and for the first time in hundreds of years, the Empire was afraid. The search began again, larger this time. Thousands of ships combed the sectors where the patrol disappeared. Days turned into weeks and the tension grew unbearable. Then it happened. In the middle of a silent night on the central planet, a signal reached every transmission tower in the capital. It didn't come through the usual channels. It bypassed every firewall, every security lock, and appeared on every screen at once. The same voice that had spoken during the first encounter returned. Calm, measured, cold as the void itself. "Do you remember?" it asked. Every living being in the capital froze. The air itself felt heavy, like the planet had stopped breathing. The voice continued, not louder but closer, as if it was inside every ear, every mind. "You built your walls from the ashes of others. You hid behind fear. You forgot that fear has a memory too." People across the empire stared in disbelief. For the first time in their lives, their leaders had no words. The Imperial fleet launched emergency defense systems, scanning the skies for any approaching vessels. But there was nothing, no heat, no movement, only silence and stars. Then suddenly the skies lit up, not with fire, but with light. Pure, soft golden light stretching across the horizon. The clouds glowed, the ocean shimmered, and every metallic surface reflected the same impossible brightness. The human vessel had returned. It appeared above the capital, silent as before, moving with a grace that no known technology could match. Its surface pulsed like living energy. It wasn't a warship, it didn't need to be. Its presence alone was enough to silence the Empire's entire army. The fleet tried to target it, but every weapon froze. Every launch system failed. Power grids shut down across the planet, leaving only the light from the vessel above. Then the voice returned, softer now. "You believed we were gone. You believed fear would protect you. But fear doesn't protect. It only blinds." People fell to their knees in the streets. The younger ones cried quietly. The older ones watched with eyes full of disbelief and guilt. The council tried to send a message, pleading for an explanation. But no words came out. Every communication system was locked, hijacked by the same silent signal. In orbit, smaller Imperial ships tried to move toward the human vessel, but their engines simply refused to start. Their computers displayed only one message: stand still. And so they did. The vessel began to shift slowly, its light forming symbols across its hull. The scientists on the ground watched in awe as the symbols changed again and again until they realized what they were seeing. Maps. The vessel was projecting old star maps. Ancient ones showing paths that hadn't existed for centuries. But they weren't random. They were maps of Earth. The images showed how humanity had once reached out to the stars, how they had built, fallen, and risen again. It showed the wars that ended them, and the peace that followed in the silence after. Then, the final image appeared, one of countless human hands glowing like starlight, reaching out toward the unknown. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't destroyed. They had become something else. Something beyond war, beyond anger, beyond the limits of what the Empire could understand. The light began to fade. The ship started to rise, slow and steady, higher and higher into the night sky. And then, for the first time since its arrival, the vessel spoke one last time. "Do not fear us. Fear what you've become." And with that it vanished, gone as quickly as it had come. The skies returned to darkness, but the world below was never the same. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was full of questions, of wonder, of realization. People walked the streets in disbelief. Some wept. Some simply stared at the stars, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The Empire's control began to crack. The Council's power faded as their lies unraveled. They couldn't explain what had happened. They couldn't hide the truth anymore. And somewhere far beyond the Empire's reach, deep in the black between galaxies, humanity watched in silence. They didn't seek revenge. They didn't return to conquer. They had become something greater, something that didn't need to speak to be understood, because sometimes silence says everything. And the Empire, for the first time in its long, powerful history, finally began to listen. From that night forward, no one looked at the stars the same way again. The word human was no longer spoken with scorn or fear. It was spoken with respect. Something had awakened in the hearts of those who had once thought themselves gods among the stars. They realized that they were not alone, and never had been. And somewhere out there in the endless dark, the humans smiled, silent, patient, waiting for the rest of the galaxy to understand what they had learned long ago. That real power is not in domination, but in peace. And that silence, when it comes from truth, can echo louder than war ever could. The Empire had begun to break apart from the inside. The silence that followed the ship's last appearance was worse than war. Entire fleets refused to leave their docks. Soldiers whispered that ghosts were haunting their systems, and civilians had started to flee from border worlds in panic. The Council met every day, trying to find answers, but no one had any. The silent human vessel had not attacked, not once, but it had done something far more powerful. It had made them afraid of their own history. Every time they tried to erase the story, it returned. Every time they told people it was fake, new evidence appeared. Videos, transmissions, memories restored from archives they thought were destroyed. It was like the ship wanted them to face the truth they had hidden for generations. Some of the younger officers began to question their loyalty. They asked why their ancestors had wiped out peaceful explorers so long ago. They asked why the Empire had lied about it for centuries. The older leaders called them traitors, but deep down they knew those questions were right. A week later, something new happened. The ship returned. It didn't arrive in secret this time. The sensors picked it up in open space just beyond the capital system. Every defense satellite locked on it instantly, every gun ready to fire. But the ship didn't move. It simply drifted, silent as before, its hull glowing with that faint blue light that now filled every officer with unease. The Council ordered it destroyed. The capital's orbital fleets opened fire all at once. Hundreds of beams and missiles filled the void. For a few seconds, the sky above the planet turned white with energy. But when the light faded, the ship was still there. Not a single mark on its surface. The gunners stopped. Their targeting systems froze. Every sensor reading failed. And then, one by one, every ship in orbit lost power. Inside the command center, screens flickered. Communications broke down. Every officer tried to reboot systems, but nothing worked. Only one thing remained active: the main viewing display showing the human vessel slowly turning to face the planet. And then it began again. The same images they had seen before filled the air. Not just on the command deck, but across the entire Empire. Every citizen, every worker, every soldier, no matter where they were, saw the same thing. It was history being played like a warning. They saw their ancestors destroying the first human explorers, laughing as ships burned in silence. They saw entire colonies wiped out before they could even send a distress call. They saw faces, human faces, filled with shock, confusion, and pain. No one could look away. The images didn't stop. They filled the sky of every major city, projected from the silent ship above. For the first time, the truth could not be hidden. And then the projection changed. It showed Earth again. The blue planet shining softly, surrounded by a ring of light. Slowly, more lights appeared around it. Dozens of vessels, sleek and quiet, forming patterns no one in the Empire could recognize. They were human ships. Real human ships, a voice followed, calm and low. "This is what you called weak," it said. "This is what you destroyed." The voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. But every word carried weight. It was human, yet it sounded older, wiser, almost timeless. "This ship is not a weapon," the voice continued. "It is memory. Memory of what was lost. Memory of what you tried to forget." The voice faded, and for a long moment, nothing happened. The Empire's capital world hung in silence. Then slowly, the power returned. Systems came back online. Engines restarted. The human vessel stopped transmitting and began to move away from the planet, drifting back toward the stars. But this time, the Empire didn't follow. The Council sat in silence, unsure of what to do. Some said they should attack again, send their entire fleet after it and end the fear once and for all. Others said it was pointless. How could they destroy something that couldn't be touched? How could they erase what was already inside every mind? The argument lasted for hours. Outside, the people had gathered in the streets, staring up at the night sky where the ship's glow was still faintly visible. Some were angry. Some were terrified. But many just stood quietly thinking. A few of them began to ask questions that had not been spoken aloud for centuries. What if the humans they had once destroyed were not gone? What if they had survived somewhere, growing stronger in the shadows of forgotten space? The thought spread quickly. Every child who looked at the stars that night felt something stir inside them, a feeling their empire had long tried to erase. It was guilt, yes, but also awe. For the first time, They wondered if maybe they were not the masters of the galaxy after all. Days passed and strange things began happening across Imperial space. Ships that had vanished years ago started to reappear, drifting in perfect condition but without crews. Each ship carried the same message etched into its hull. We remember. No one could explain how it was possible. These were vessels that had been destroyed in wars or lost in deep space. But here they were again, floating silently, untouched by time. The Empire tried to collect and study them, but each one disappeared the moment they approached. It was as if they were being warned not to touch what wasn't theirs anymore. Meanwhile, deep space sensors detected faint signals, transmissions coming from beyond the galactic edge. They were weak, fragmented, but clear enough to read. Coordinates. The coordinates pointed directly toward the region where the first human explorers had been destroyed centuries ago, the same place the silent ship had come from. The council debated endlessly. Some wanted to investigate, others wanted to seal that sector forever. In the end, curiosity won. They sent a single scout ship, unmanned and heavily shielded, to follow the signal. For 3 days, nothing returned. Then, without warning, the probe sent back one final image before vanishing. It showed dozens, maybe hundreds, of human ships drifting in formation, their hulls marked with the same glowing symbols as the silent vessel. They weren't attacking. They weren't hiding. They were waiting. The message attached to the image was simple. We do not seek war. We seek truth. When the council saw it, they realized something they had never considered before. Humanity wasn't rising against them out of hatred. They were rising because they wanted the Empire to face what it had done, to remember, to acknowledge, and to change. But pride is a hard thing to let go of. Many of the older leaders refused to believe it. They said it was all manipulation and illusion. They ordered the fleets to prepare for war. But their ships refused to move. Crew after crew declined the orders. Commanders deactivated their weapons. Even the AI systems seemed to resist. The Empire had been built on obedience, but now its own machines hesitated, as if they too could feel the truth. And in that silence, the human ship returned again. This time, it didn't glow. It was dark and still, like a shadow drifting across the stars. It moved closer to the Imperial capital once more, but instead of stopping, it passed by. Slowly, quietly, without a single signal or weapon fired, everyone watched it go. Not with anger, not with fear, but with understanding. The ship's passing left a strange peace behind. It was as if a weight had lifted. The Empire had been forced to face what it had become. Somewhere far away, humanity had sent a message not of destruction, but of memory. And now, the galaxy had no choice but to listen. The silent vessel disappeared beyond the edge of the system, leaving only a faint trail of light behind. Many called it a ghost. Some called it a warning, but a few, the quiet ones who truly understood, called it what it really was: hope. The Empire didn't fall that day, but something inside it changed forever. The people no longer looked at humans as weak or forgotten. They looked at them with respect, because deep down they finally understood what the silence had meant all along. It wasn't the silence of death. It was the silence before awakening. And somewhere out there in the endless dark, humanity was awake. The stars above the Empire's capital were calm again, but no one trusted the silence anymore. Every commander, every pilot, every citizen who looked up at the sky felt that same cold unease in their chest. The silent human vessel was gone, yet its memory remained like an invisible scar. It hadn't attacked, it hadn't spoken again, but everyone knew it was still out there, watching. In the weeks that followed, the Empire changed in ways no one had seen before. People stopped believing in the stories their rulers told. They stopped trusting the history books. They started to question who they really were and what they had done. At first, the council tried to regain control. They released statements calling the human vessel a false creation, a trick of light, a digital illusion. But even as they spoke, new signals began to appear in space, small pulses of light that formed patterns, symbols not used by the Empire. Every observatory across the galaxy picked them up. Scientists tried to decode them, and what they found left everyone speechless. The signals formed words in an old human language. They said, "We see you. We forgive, but we do not forget." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was something far more powerful. a reminder that the humans who had once been destroyed were now strong enough to choose mercy. The Empire's military command didn't understand how to respond. They had built their strength through fear and control, not through understanding. How could they face an enemy who didn't seek to destroy them, but to teach them? Still, some within the Empire couldn't let go of their pride. A secret order was formed, made up of generals and admirals who refused to accept defeat. They decided to go after the human ships themselves. They gathered their best vessels, armed them with new weapons, and set a course toward the edge of the galaxy, the same place the signals came from. When the fleet left the capital, millions of people watched their departure in silence. No one cheered. No one smiled. It felt like a funeral procession heading toward a truth no one wanted to see. For days, the fleet traveled through deep space. Nothing unusual happened. The stars were quiet, the system stable. The commanders began to believe the human ships were gone. But then the readings changed. At first, it was just static on the sensors. Then came faint shapes on the horizon, shadows against the background of distant stars. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. The fleet slowed. The shadows moved. The human vessels appeared from the dark, surrounding the Imperial ships in complete silence. Their designs were unlike anything ever seen. They had no visible engines, no weapon mounts, no markings of war, just smooth, glowing hulls that pulsed like living things. The Imperial commanders gave the order to open communications. There was no response. They sent hails in every known frequency. Nothing. Then one of the human ships moved closer. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, and a soft light rippled through its structure. The Empire's scanners went wild. The readings were impossible. Energy levels beyond measurable limits. No trace of conventional fuel or radiation. Before anyone could act, the voice returned. It wasn't loud, but it filled every ship, every mind, every thought. Why do you follow fear? It asked. Why do you chase shadows when the truth is already in front of you? The commanders froze. They tried to trace the signal, but it didn't come from anywhere. It came from everywhere. The voice continued, calm and steady. Your ancestors made choices in darkness. You still carry their weight. You cannot erase it by silence or denial. You can only face it. The admirals shouted orders, trying to regain control, but it was too late. Their ships stopped responding. The systems had gone completely cold. Outside, the human vessels began to move again, slowly drifting between the frozen Imperial ships. They didn't attack. They simply passed by, their lights glowing brighter as they moved together, forming patterns across the void. It looked like a constellation coming to life. Then one of the younger officers, unable to stand the tension, spoke softly to no one in particular. What do you want from us? The voice answered at once, gentle but clear. We want you to remember, and to understand. With those words, every Imperial screen turned white. The crew saw flashes of Earth, of its people, of their cities. They saw children running through streets filled with sunlight, oceans shining under blue skies, music echoing through open air. They saw what humanity had once been. Not soldiers, not conquerors, but dreamers. Then the vision shifted. They saw the same people fighting to survive after the old wars, rebuilding their world from ashes, sending new ships into space with hope instead of hate. Humanity hadn't vanished after the massacre. They had endured. When the light faded, the Imperial officers found themselves speechless. They had spent their entire lives believing humans were weak, primitive, and short-lived. But now they saw the truth. They were something else entirely. They were resilient. They were unbreakable. One by one, the Imperial ships powered back up. The systems rebooted. The human vessels began to pull away, retreating toward the endless dark once again. The commanders didn't follow. They couldn't. Something inside them had changed. When they returned to the Empire weeks later, they brought no trophies, no victories, only silence. The council demanded reports, but none of them could explain what had happened. They simply said, "We met them." Those 3 words spread across the Empire faster than any news could. We met them. To the people, it meant more than contact. It meant confrontation with truth. From that moment, things began to shift. The Empire's education systems changed. History lessons started to include stories of Earth and the first explorers. Monuments were built not for victory, but for remembrance. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly. The people began to heal. For the first time in centuries, the Empire sent a peaceful transmission to the stars. It wasn't a demand or a call for power. It was simple and sincere. To the ones we wronged, it said, "We remember now." Weeks passed. No reply came. The silence returned, heavy but not cruel. Many thought humanity had moved on, that they would never answer. Then one night a light appeared above the imperial capital. Faint at first, then growing brighter. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't an attack. It was a single ship, the same silent human vessel that had started everything. It entered orbit quietly, shining like a moon. No weapons, no movement, no sound. For hours it stayed there as if watching the world below. People gathered across every city, staring up, waiting for something to happen. Then a soft pulse rippled through the sky, gentle waves of light dancing through the clouds. The ship began to send a message visible to every eye across the planet. It wasn't words this time. It was a symbol, a circle of light with a single line through it. A human symbol for peace. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the council members who had once ruled with iron command stood in awe. And then, as silently as it came, the ship turned and drifted away, disappearing into the stars once again. No destruction. No war, just peace. From that day on, the Empire changed forever. The story of the silent vessel was told in every school, every colony, every home. It became more than history. It became a lesson. They learned that real power was not found in fear, but in remembrance. That the strongest ones are not those who conquer, but those who endure. And somewhere beyond the edge of the galaxy, the humans continued their journey, watching, waiting, guiding in silence. They didn't need to speak anymore. The message had already been delivered. The Empire, once built on fear, had finally understood what humanity had meant all along. Silence was never emptiness. It was understanding, and from that understanding, peace had begun. Years passed after the silent human vessel disappeared into the stars once more. The empire that had once ruled the galaxy with fear began to feel different. The air of arrogance that had filled its cities started to fade, replaced by something softer. Curiosity, reflection, and a strange kind of hope. No one forgot what had happened. People still spoke of the day the ship came, the day the humans showed their power without war. They didn't destroy cities or armies. They didn't demand anything. They simply made everyone see, and that was enough to change everything. At first, the Imperial Council tried to hold on to their control. They thought they could twist the story, turn it into another tale of imperial greatness. But the people no longer listened. They had seen too much. They had seen the truth in the silence of that human vessel. Old traditions began to crumble. Young scientists and thinkers started to explore what humanity had shown them. They studied the human message again and again. We see you. We forgive, but we do not forget. Some thought it was a warning. Others believed it was a gift, a sign that humans were giving them a second chance to grow, not as rulers, but as beings capable of understanding. Slowly, new schools were built, not to train soldiers, but to teach about unity, history, and the meaning of life beyond conquest. The Empire, once driven by fear of others, began to send missions not to control, but to learn. Yet even as peace began to take root, questions remained. Where had the humans gone? How far had they evolved? What were they becoming? Every telescope pointed to the stars tried to find them again. Every signal, every pulse, every faint echo in space was studied with care. But there was nothing, only the quiet hum of the universe. It was as if humanity had become part of the stars themselves. One evening, a deep space station at the far edge of the Empire detected something unusual. It was not a ship, not a fleet, but a wave of light, gentle and slow, traveling across the galaxy. It wasn't random. It carried a pattern, symbols that matched the ones the human ship had shown before. When decoded, the symbols formed a message. You are learning. That simple phrase spread like fire across the Empire. It reached every world, every station, every soul that still remembered the silent vessel. And for the first time, the people didn't respond with fear or confusion. They smiled. The Empire realized that the humans were still watching, not to control them, but to see what they would become. It was not surveillance. It was guidance, like a teacher quietly hoping a student would finally understand the lesson. Years turned into decades. The Empire transformed. Its armies became explorers. Its engineers built ships not for war, but for discovery. They began restoring planets they had once stripped bare, planting forests where there had been dust, rebuilding ecosystems they had once ignored. And through it all, the memory of humanity guided them. Children grew up hearing stories of the silent ship that had come like a ghost and left like a guardian. To them, humans were not monsters or myths. They were proof that peace was not weakness, and that power without compassion was nothing. But the real turning point came when the Empire's new explorers discovered something unexpected. On a small, forgotten world near the edge of known space, they found ruins, ancient, made of strange metal that still pulsed faintly with energy. Inside, there were carvings and lights that looked human in design. The explorers walked carefully through the ruins, reading inscriptions left behind long ago. The words were simple but powerful. We were here. We built, we left. And now it is your turn. The message was older than anyone expected, possibly left centuries before the silent ship ever appeared. It meant that humanity had already been there, long before the Empire even knew they existed. The discovery shook the Empire's leaders to their core. The humans hadn't come to show off their power. They had come to remind the Empire of what they once were, of what they could still be. The ruins became a sacred site. People traveled from every corner of the Empire to see them. Pilgrims, scientists, children, all came to stand in the silent halls where humans had once walked. Many said that when they stood there they felt something, a strange calm, a warmth that couldn't be explained. It was as if the walls themselves still remembered the presence of those who had once dreamed among the stars. As time moved on, the Empire no longer called itself by its old name. They renamed it simply the Union of Worlds. They removed the word empire because it no longer fit who they were. They didn't rule anymore. They connected. New alliances formed between worlds that had once feared each other. Trade replaced conflict. Debate replaced battle. And though not every problem vanished, the Union faced each challenge with the memory of the humans guiding their path. Every year, on the day the human vessel had first appeared, the Union held a day of silence. No broadcasts, no speeches, no celebrations, just silence. It was a moment for everyone to look at the sky and remember that sometimes the greatest lessons come not from war but from stillness. During one of those silent days, an old astronomer sat in his observatory looking at the stars. He had lived his whole life studying the signals left behind by humans, hoping to see them again. As he stared into the dark, he noticed something faint, a light flickering between constellations. He adjusted his lens. The light grew stronger. It wasn't random. It was pulsing. He recorded it and translated the pulses, his hands shaking. It was another message. You have done well. Tears filled his eyes. He didn't call anyone. He didn't need to. He simply looked up and whispered, "Thank you." The message was short-lived. The light faded. The stars returned to their normal calm, but the meaning stayed forever. The humans were out there, somewhere beyond reach, perhaps no longer bound by time or form. But they hadn't abandoned the galaxy. They were waiting, watching as others learned what they had once learned, that true strength is not in domination but in understanding. And so, generations passed. The story of the silent human vessel became a part of the Union's soul. It was told in songs, written in poems, painted on the walls of cities that now reached for the stars not to conquer, but to connect. The day came when the Union finally built their first ship capable of traveling beyond their galaxy. As it prepared to launch, its hull was engraved with ancient words that every child of the Union knew by heart. We remember. We forgive. We understand. When the engines ignited and the ship began its journey, billions watched in silence. They knew where they were heading, toward the unknown, toward the place where humanity had gone. As the ship disappeared into the stars, a faint glow appeared behind it, soft, white, and silent. Some said it was just light reflecting from a distant sun. Others believed it was something more, because for a brief moment, that light looked exactly like the shape of the silent human vessel that had once come to their world. And though it vanished seconds later, everyone who saw it felt the same quiet certainty deep within. Humanity was still out there, watching, guiding. The empire that had once feared them now carried their message across the stars, continuing what humanity had started long ago. The silence that had once brought fear now carried peace. and the words that had changed everything were remembered forever. Simple, eternal human, we see you. We forgive, but we do not forget. The galaxy never forgot that silence could be more powerful than war, and somewhere, beyond the reach of any telescope, the humans smiled in the dark, knowing their lesson had finally taken root.